Hi everyone, Alex here with a quick word from our sponsor, SeatGeek. SeatGeek is your one-stop shop for tickets for everything from live theater and concerts to sporting events like Rays games. SeatGeek uses a color-coded scale to show you where the best deals are, with green being good and red being bad. If you haven't used SeatGeek before, we have a special deal just for you. Use code RAISETHEROOF, that's RAISE spelled R-A-Y-S, at checkout for $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek. Again, that's code RAISETHEROOF for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Thanks so much to SeatGeek for sponsoring us, and let's get back to this latest episode of Raise the Roof. Welcome back to this latest off-season episode of Raise the Roof. I am your host, Alex Murphy. We're going to be doing a little bit more of a one-on-one podcast today. We do have a special guest who I will introduce in just a second. We're recording this the day before the Pinellas County Commissioners meeting, which I would assume is going to be the meeting where they're going to be voting on the other set of bonds for the upcoming Rays Stadium, new stadium, depending on whether that actually happens or not. So who better to have on for this than someone who we've already had on to talk about the stadium, Tampa Bay Times St. Pete reporter Colleen Wright. Colleen, thanks for coming back on the podcast. How have you been through this? Because I know that, I feel like at this point, we're done talking about it because it just seems like it's just getting to a point of no return. I don't know how it's been like for you, but I can imagine definitely tumultuous.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Yeah, it's definitely the never-ending story. And even no matter what happens tomorrow, you mentioned tomorrow's the Pinellas County Commission vote on the bonds, there's still no clear path forward at all. So tomorrow's meeting is kind of just the next step in the never-ending story of will the Rays have a forever home in Tampa Bay or not?
Yeah. Now, when we had talked last time, they had approved the stadium without approving all of the bonds and everything like that. They had just said, we're going to vote for this and we're going to approve this, and then we'll obviously go back to everything else at a later date. How, since that point, because we know that St. Pete has approved their side of the public funding for the new stadium. Where have things, in your opinion, where have things gone in the months that have followed that? From a purely objective standpoint of this, is there reason to be optimistic or reason to be pessimistic, or is there no reason to feel anything right now because it doesn't seem like anything is going to be properly happening?
I wish I could give you such a straight answer, but I don't know if anybody should be, if you want a stadium deal to happen, I don't know if you can feel very optimistic. Unfortunately, and I know that's just not a clear answer. So
yeah.
Here's kind of what could happen. So the commission could, first of all, as you know, we talked about the deal being done in July, and these bond votes were kind of viewed as a formality, and they would probably fall along the same voting lines for the city council and the commission as they did back in July. But then there were delays, kind of due to the hurricane, right? It just kind of pushed these bond votes out. It happened on the city council too. I saw that they were scheduled end of September, early October. Obviously, that didn't happen. So when they came back up, the county commission voted to, delay these bonds, and it kind of put it after the election. And the way the county works is those commissioners get sworn in immediately. Unlike city council, those guys the new members of city council get sworn in January. So when that happened, the county commission lost a majority that was in favor of the deal. And the two commissioners that were elected, not in favor. That's kind of the rub here. Just on votes alone, the deal is not favored. However, we're at a point now that you mentioned that the city council already did pass its bonds. Because those elections haven't taken place yet, they followed along the same voting lines. Again, not the same case on the county. So what that kind of does is it puts it on the county commission to either, three things could happen. They could vote no, which they have the votes to vote no. And that would kind of leave a $312.5 million hole in the project. And you could possibly end up in a situation where there's a historic gas plant district development of all these condos and a museum and, shops and restaurants and entertainment over 60 some acres, but no stadium. There could be a delay. And then the commission would just punt this to the next meeting in January, or someone could flip and vote yes. And the argument for yes is that it would kind of lock the raise into the agreement that was signed into a deal back in July, right? When everyone was celebrating, we have a done deal. So it kind of puts it on the raise to back out. Now, this is important because right now, the only party in all these agreements is the raise that has the power to back out. The county right now cannot back out. The city right now cannot back out. Only the raise can. And so the Rays have been saying all these delays are kind of running up the cost for us in construction. We can no longer afford it. Well, what a yes vote on the commission would do would kind of lock them into that and say, okay, well, if you can't afford it, then automatically terminate. Send us an official letter. And that's kind of the only thing the county could do. The only way the city and the county could back out is if a stadium isn't built by 2030. So that's what I mean by the only people who have the power right now to back out are the Rays, because obviously that date doesn't come up for another 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So even if the commission goes ahead and someone has a change of heart and the bonds get passed, and the Rays, by the way, anticipate that the bonds will get passed, they think that someone's going to flip. But they've been saying there's still no deal because we still have to kind of plug this financial gap of funding that they say has increased because they've had these delays, but they've never put a number to it. We don't know how big that gap is. That has not been disclosed publicly. So even though, I guess the cleanest path forward would be if the commission votes yes, but that doesn't mean we're getting a stadium deal, because it's on the Rays then to see if they uphold their end of the deal. That's a very long answer, but that's pretty much all the prospects that could come out of tomorrow.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's the important thing here is people want to know kind of what to expect. The thing that was curious that I know you had just talked about and we had all kind of found out was that there's this some sort of delay thing on the Rays where money could be added on, all of that stuff. How legitimate is that on their end to say that there is actual delays that are going to be happening, there's going to be more money that's going to be added? Because I mean, as of what we knew back in July, it was supposed to be shovels in the ground in January, and if they approve it tomorrow, then technically the timeline of them being able to put shovels in the ground in January still seems like it would be on, though it would just be a shorter time frame. But how legitimate is their claims of saying hey, these delays have now delayed us to be able to get done what we need to get done for this new stadium?
So first of all, I don't know if shovels were ever going to go in the ground in January. I think that might have been said, but I think first quarter was maybe more accurate, and that's what I was banking on anyway. But the Rays now say that they can't afford to open up a ballpark in 2029, which is what these delays have pushed it to. That they would not be able to open in 28; they would have to open in 29. How legitimate are they? Well, I couldn't, because we don't know what the number is or what exactly is the delay. They have not shed any light on that. And we're also talking, they also say it's not just delay with bond votes, but also delays in the negotiations. Let me use the language that city officials use, because, I want to be careful not to put my opinion on anything. But what St. Petersburg city officials have said is perceived funding gaps. That's the word that St. Petersburg officials have used, perceived funding gaps, because that implies that they don't know either. City council doesn't know what the delays are. Again, we have never seen a number of what that delay would be. You could probably just surmise, just with the way costs are and inflation, everything going up, that maybe there would be some increased costs. But we have to remember too that part of the deal, and City Council member John Muhammad brought this up. He voted no, but he did bring this up, saying when the deal that was agreed upon in July had the Rays on the hook for all cost overruns. That was kind of a way to sell it to the public, because there's a lot in there, right? You're giving the Rays, they're taking care of, it's a $1.3 billion stadium. They're taking care of 700,000, but the rest, 600,000 is on the city and county, and then we're selling 65 public acres at a significant discount of $105 million. And the Rays keep all revenue of naming rights, tickets, sponsorships, concessions. The Rays keep all of that. What they would take on in return was all cost overruns and insurance, which we know is very expensive, right? So that was the trade-off. And so now to hear them say, oh, these costs are driving us up, it kind of calls into question exactly what is a cost overrun. And they might say that these delays don't count as that. And
Mhm.
I'm not a lawyer, but I went back into the agreements to look every time there was a cost overrun, and the most I could get out of it was like anything that exceeds current budget. There's a possibility this ends up in court. I don't know if that's the case. No one has threatened court. I'm just
Yeah,
saying if
yeah.
it comes down to what is a cost overrun, lawyers might have to duke that one out. So is it legit or not? Is it backed up or not? I don't know. They haven't shared really any information that would back that up. And again, St. Pete City, city officials are calling it perceived.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing just sounds chaotic, and I'm not someone who lives in the area, so I'm not someone who's like on the ground like you are, and others who have been following this closely, have seen everything play out. Like, it just feels, as you were talking about, it's like this never-ending story, this never-ending saga. Like, how tired are people of all of this stuff? Because, like, on my end, I mean, like, as we've been doing with this podcast, we've tried to not talk about it as much as possible because of how much of a headache it's become for people. But at certain points, you just need to talk about it. Like tomorrow is a significant event that's going to happen, so we need to make sure that we talk about it. But it just feels like it's become like an ad nauseum thing, and it's just, I mean, like, I'm sure that people are beyond annoyed by how this has gone so far.
Yeah, there's certainly fatigue. And you got to remember what this is coming off the heels off of is two back-to-back hurricanes that were not direct hits to Tampa Bay, but almost might as well be. I mean, there's a lot of damage here. The city of St. Petersburg just took out a $50 million loan to
Gee.
bridge costs for FEMA, like in between FEMA reimbursements as it
Yeah,
waits for insurance claims to come in and FEMA reimbursements, like $50 million. And this
that's a
is
lot
like
of money.
a rich, yeah, and this is a city with money, and they had to go take out 50 million. So I think, one thing about the fatigue is a lot of people are like, for example, Vice Chairperson Brian Scott on the county commission,
Hmm.
who was just elected to be chairperson of next year in 2025. He doesn't want a delay. Like, he just wants like an up or down vote. Like, are we having bonds? Are we not having bonds? Because he's like, we got to move on. Like, there's
Yeah.
just other things that we need to get to and focus on that are real problems. Like, and there are commissioners who are sitting on that board who lost their home in the hurricanes. I mean, and no one, the deal with the trop is right is that it's hard to ignore because it is a 30-year deal, right? We're talking $6.5 billion in public and private investment. Just the historic gas plant district alone is going to be larger than like a lot of beach towns. We're talking like 6,000 new residences. I mean, it's huge. It could be its own little city.
Yeah.
So this vote has magnitude, even though right now we're talking about, really, for better or for worse, subsidizing a private corporation, right? To build a stadium for sports. And no one lives at the Trop currently. That's the other
Yeah.
thing, right? So there's that element, and there's definitely wanting to just have some kind of solution or ending to this.
Hmm.
And then people want to move on. And then, of course, yeah, I know that, like, I'm covering kind of like every twist and turn. But yeah, people are kind of like, can we focus on real issues and like people's real lives, and like,
Yeah.
getting people's lives back on track? There's definitely a fatigue. And I feel it even when I call city council members and commissioners. Like, I get told, like, hey, I know you're doing your job, but I'm so tired of talking about this.
I can't imagine.
And yeah, and like, I can't fault them for that at all. And they understand my position. It's not personal. I don't take it
Yeah,
personally.
yeah.
But yeah, and one thing I'll tell you too that people are really tired of is, like, people have been called out, like, and when I mean people, I mean commissioners, the Pinellas County Commission specifically.
Yeah.
Even people who want this deal to happen, like Brian Scott, the vice chair, is going to be chairperson.
Yeah.
He wants the deal to happen, and he said, my colleague Jack Evans quoted him as like, every day the Rays fall lower in his esteem because of just how they've been communicating and just the difference in spottiness. And are they showing up to the meeting? Are they not showing up to the meeting? Are they going to show up and not speak? Are they going to show up and threaten the deal? Like, it's kind of all over the place what the reaction has been. But if you talk to the Rays, they're saying, like, no one will believe us, and people still think that there's a deal, and there's no deal to be had if there's not more money.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the bottom line here, is that the Rays are straight up saying there is no deal unless we get more money. But nobody will believe them unless they just pull out. And why won't they pull out? But because they're sitting on the 65 acres of land that they've agreed to purchase. The first payment is due in 2025. And they get that. If they terminate the deal, they don't get that land.
Yeah.
And could they use that land? And if this falls apart, let's say the county votes no tomorrow, right? And they could take that land and go fund the stadium somewhere else, Tampa, elsewhere. I have no idea. But that's why they're not sitting on it. And that's why people won't believe them that they're backing out, because unless that termination letter comes through, they're locked in.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know that you had put something out, or something had come out in the Tampa Bay Times about the Rays talking with Tampa about, the possibility of putting something there. I feel like that just adds to the fatigue, because we already had the deal happen, or something happened in 2018, and then I think it was Stu that pulled out of that just that deal didn't work in 2018. But I feel like things like that just continue to add to it. And I know one of the things that I was curious to ask you about was something that was brought up in the city council meeting about I forget who it was, saying that we should try to call the Rays bluff and see, if we approve this, let's see what happens. Because and as you were talking about, as of right now, if the county says no, it's kind of on and if the Rays, end up not being able to find that 300+ million to help fund the new stadium, that's on the county more or less, that they weren't able to keep the team in the area if the team ends up moving out. But if the county and the city approve it, then they're like, hey, we've approved these public funds, now it's on the Rays. And if the Rays say no, then it's the Rays' problem. So has that become more of a thing of trying to call them out and saying hey, we've approved our side of it. Now, if you want to stay here, you're going to have to, honor your commitments that you made back in the summer?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's become not only a thing of, is this a good deal? Should we do this? Which you could argue is probably settled upon back in July, but it's also become who's winning the narrative? Because the Rays have really put it on the commission, you all delayed this. This is on you.
Yeah.
But according to, again, I'm going to bring up Brian Scott, the vice chair of the commission. He got a call before the first bond vote was even taken from Brian Auld, who's the president of the Rays, saying, I'm doing my best to keep this deal together, that this is hard to even pay for. So that was the first indication before any vote was delayed that there might be an issue with funding, period. So there's this idea, and it still comes up, and it came up again at this commission workshop that was last week. And they do this workshop to kind of prepare for the vote.
Yeah.
That'll take place tomorrow. And there are a lot of commissioners who are really peeved with this narrative that it's because of them that things are delayed, and this is the reason why. And to take it back to what happened in October at the first delay, when the bonds first came for a vote, I should say, and then they voted for delay. It was the first time that the commission met after the hurricane. Again, back-to-back hurricanes, 1 day short of 2 weeks apart exactly. And they wanted to know where the Rays were playing their interim season, because as we know, Hurricane Milton tore the roof off Tropicana Field, right, making it unusable for 2025. And they wanted to know where the team would play for the next season. And their argument was, since tourist tax dollars, when you stay at a hotel or an Airbnb or short-term rental, that tax dollar line, that money is what's going to fund the new stadium from the county side. So their rationale was, we want them to stay in Pinellas so that those bed tax dollars stay here, right? Because if they leave the county, you're taking away the dollars that would be funding your stadium. And and at that point, the Rays had not been saying anything for a while. They were pretty radio silent. And so even commissioners, the Rays' biggest cheerleaders on that commission voted to delay. It was a 6-1 vote to delay. And the one guy who didn't vote to delay lost his seat to a stadium skeptic. So there's this idea, and the commission will say too, we did not know that the whole thing was riding on this. And some people say, or the Rays would say, they should have known what was riding on this. But the Rays also, I'm so sorry, the Rays also were not present at that meeting. Maybe because it was understood that it was a formality. They say that they had no indication, right, that it would be delayed. But they did. So the commission is kind of saying we're not the ones who held this up. we've just been doing what we're doing. We wanted to know where you guys are playing. We wanted more clarity. And so there's this tussle and kind of this negotiating public that you hadn't seen for several years between the county and the Rays. And so, yeah, there is this narrative of like, who's going to be to blame if this all falls apart? And, some county commissioners will sit there and be like, hey, I don't care if it's a no, like it's a bad deal, period, end of story. But some people do look at it as calling the bluff. And the city council member you're referencing, Brandy Gabbard, saw it that way. A county commissioner told me that city administrator Rob Gertis told him basically the same thing. We have to call their bluff. So some people do see that as like, this is the way to kind of stick it to them. And like, if they're really serious, let them be the ones to pull out. Mm-hmm. And with the land deal kind of in the middle of this, I can see that happening. But yeah, the Rays are saying, we're not calling anybody's bluff. We're being very straight up. We can't afford this.
Yeah.
But again, no number.
Yeah.
No, like, what is the thing? This is the gap. Like, there's been no public explanation for that.
Yeah. Now, with that, looking at the Rays side of things, because again, I know that like they're not quote unquote obligated to say anything until they actually have to say something, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes for them. But from your perspective, what has been your perception of how the team has how the team has acted through this? Because I know that as much as I want the deal to happen, just because I want to see the team stay in the area, I also know that it seems like, and I've seen it, like the team hasn't done any favors to itself to try to look more positively in the eyes of the people that are going to be voting to help them stay in the area.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's kind of like the Rays think that they're being straightforward. The Rays think that they're being straightforward. They're being honest and saying, we can't afford this. We want to tell you right now, we can't afford it. But then again, people are saying, okay, then pull out. Send us an official termination letter. We can do this whole back and forth thing, but like pull out. Because if it was really dead, I mean, why are we having these votes?
Yeah.
And by the way, that is something that like No Home Run, which is kind of like the grassroots opposition group who does not want this deal to happen, whatever, is they're kind of saying like, what are you voting on? They're saying that you don't have a deal. So why vote? Why do this at all? So yeah, it really depends on where you fall on it.
Yeah.
But even, I mean, like I said, even the Rays anticipate that there's going to be a flipped vote tomorrow, and it'll be likely a flip vote from someone who might have voted no in the past, who sees and reads the situation for what it is and thinks, yeah, if this is a way to kind of lock them in, or do we want to leave things to chance and leave like a fuzzier outcome and possibly, build something without a stadium, and then they have control of the land. And you know what I mean? It's really complicated. It gets even more complicated when you think the Rays are going to be with us unless there's some kind of settlement or whatever, like because of Tropicana Field and that agreement, the current agreement, for every year that the team can't play in the Trop, a year gets added to the agreement. So for example, 2025, right? The agreement pauses, it's tacked on. So now the agreement goes through 28. So we're going to be with the Rays for a minute unless some kind of other solution or settlement or something else kind of comes out of that. We're going to be dealing with these guys for a minute. So some people might read it as like, yeah, let's call the bluff. Let's just put it to them. And if they really can't afford it, put it on them to back out. But that's the thing. So whatever the commission decides tomorrow, it's really on the Rays. The Rays will have, the ball will be in their court after Tuesday. And unclear, by the way, if they are going to be at the meeting. That's been another thing, because they've shown up to meetings, but they haven't, they've shown up to meetings, but not spoken. They've shown up to meetings to basically say the deal is dead. They've not shown up to meetings. I mean, it's been kind of like very different all around. So I don't know if they are going to the meeting tomorrow, but I know that that's also like a point of contention.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen. And if you don't know, then I definitely don't know. Looking at going to what's going on with the Trop, because I know that the city just approved like $2 million to kind of put some blueprints together on and plan about what might happen in the future. And as you said, with this current 30-year lease, it's now until 2028 instead of 2027 because of what's happening. Is there any indication, because I know that we had that vote where they said yes to the initial part of the funding to help repair it, and then the Rays were like no, and then everyone else just immediately said no, which was a wild turn of events that happened in that meeting. But what do we know about what's going to be happening with renovations if there's going to be any? Because I assume if you're spending $2 million to try to plan to see what's going to happen over these next couple of years, I'm assuming that they're going to try their best to play back in the Trop and get things ready for a couple of years.
Yes, sort of. So there's a
Okay.
big key part here, which is that in this agreement, right, that's still in place, that's the one that pauses now and tax on a year. In that agreement, you got to remember, like the city is kind of like the landlord of
Mhm.
the Trop, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Rays are their tenant. And there's a line in there that says within the first 3 months of the dome being damaged, you need to hire an architect or an engineer and to put together plans, and that will satisfy the
Okay.
beginning of repair. So really, it's a CYA, it's a bare minimum kind of step that the
Okay,
city
got
needs
it,
to
got it, got it.
take to not be in default of its contract and not be
Got it.
dragged to court. So these plans, so yes, to go over what happened, this is all running together for me, but this was last month. To
You're
go
all
over
good.
what
You're all
happened,
good.
there is a report that came out that pretty much says there's like 56-ish million dollars of damage to the Trop. The roof is like 24 million of that or something like that. And you got to do this and this. And by the way, this doesn't include costs for like the acoustics and like other like membranes and special things that you need to do to the roof. So these are low estimates. And they said, yeah, we'll probably maybe be ready by opening day 2026.
Mm.
And after the city voted yes, because again, the votes are there. It's the same, it follows along the same votes, 4-3, on the city council. Then Brian Auld told reporters, I was there, I was one of them, and he was pretty much like, actually, we'd rather them say no because we do not believe that the Trop is going to be ready by 2026. It would give us more certainty if we could just plan another solution for 26.
Mm.
Like this whole like will they be ready or not by 25 and 26 and have to go before the council again and get approval and delays, right? That's kind of the theme here. The Rays have said they don't have any confidence that it'll be fixed by 26.
Mm.
That's why then a council member actually read out the remarks that Brian Auld made to the media to the council. The council called back the vote and unanimously turned it down. So they brought it back this past Thursday only to pretty much satisfy the agreement. It's like the bare minimum they can do
Got
to
it, got it,
remain
got
in
it. Okay.
compliance. Yeah, and the timeline still has them that like they could do all this stuff by opening day 26. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. Whether there could be, like I said, a settlement that gets them out of this 95 grade. That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We don't know if that'll come or not. I don't know if they're
Mm.
brokering that or not, but it's possible.
Yeah. Now with because we do know that the Rays are playing at Steinbrenner in Tampa in 25. And I know that there was some opposition from the county at least about them moving there. Is there a little bit more of an understanding now, knowing that I think that there were some repairs that were going to happen at the Philly Spring Training Stadium, or something like that. There were things being planned in terms of renovations there. And with everything that happened in Dunedin, that stadium is just way too small if you're going to try to put a major league team there, even though the Blue Jays did play there for a little bit, back in, I think it was 2021. Like, is there a little bit more understanding of like, hey, this is the reason why the Rays moved to Tampa, at least for next year?
Yeah, I think the commission, they're okay with the decision. And like some of them will say, like, we're business owners. We understand that Steinbrenner's base is way better compared to the Philly Stadium and the Dunedin Blue Jay Stadium for to have the season. It's just
Mm.
bigger. The facilities are better. Like, it's night and day. This is getting more into like Mark Topkin territory.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because I do the unfun stuff and cover the government, but I don't, this is more of like an MLB thing. But the commission is okay with the idea to go plant Steinbrenner. What they're not okay with and what they've been frustrated with is the communication or lack thereof,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
like they just would have appreciated getting a call being like, hey, we're going to Steinbrenner. This is why Dunedin doesn't work. This is why the Philly Stadium doesn't work. Instead, they got a call like 30 minutes before the announcement went out, kind of just
Yeah,
giving them a heads up.
yeah, yeah.
Some people would say not really how you want to treat commissioners who A, have been on your side. I mean, we're talking people who are in favor to not get phone calls.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And B, like just talk to us. That's kind of what they were asking about. They kind of felt like, hey, if you're getting $300 million, shouldn't we hear from you? Like that's kind of it's a notion of like communication is maybe the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like on my end. Is there's definitely a lot of communication things. The
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to talk to you about is just what is going to happen because I know that we already discussed it to an extent of whether they're going to delay it, say no, say yes, whatever. And just going off of because I don't know if they're going to delay it. Like at this point, at least in my opinion, it feels like they're probably going to vote yes or no on it, but I could be dead wrong. In a situation like both situations, one where they say yes and one where they say no, where do we go from here? Because I know the no is they're going to need to find ways to replenish and find that 300 million gap, and then who knows what's going to happen with yes. But like, where do we go depending on the strict yes or no results of tomorrow? Wow, yeah, yes as
So
well.
yes, let's start with a yes. Because like I said before, I guess the yes is like maybe the clearest path forward. Maybe it's then it'll be on the raise.
Yeah,
Okay, actually this is a better answer. So by March 31st of 2025, the Rays have to show that they've met certain requirements in order to access the public money made available by the bond. And it's like you got to show that like 50% of this is just off the top of my head,
yeah,
not exactly exact, but it's like 50% of like the designs that they spent like X amount of money, that they've like done like certain things that show that they are on their way. And this actually came up before the city council voted on their bonds. There's like not all the benchmarks have been met so far.
mm,
The city, St. Petersburg, believes that they're there, but they haven't seen, I think they've only seen proof of like one or two, but not all of them.
yeah,
The Pinellas County Administrator Barry Burton sent an email to Matt Silverman after the workshop last week saying, "Hey, you might want to bring proof or like provide proof of this to commissioners before they vote because they want to see that you're that far along." Because some commissioners were like, "Why are we doing this if they are the ones who have this March 31st deadline? The city and the county do not."
yeah,
So they're kind of like, you show us that you're doing this, and then we'll vote on the bonds.
yeah.
So that's kind of like the argument for delaying, which is like kind of pushing it out to see if they ever like meet that March 31st deadline. Um, so that has to happen. And then yeah, I think it's like the city and the county can only pull out if like a stadium isn't built by like 2030 or something. And I mean that's so down the line that it's like hard to kind of like wrap your head around that of like how far away 2030 is. Um, but yeah, so it will put it on the raise. Really, I think as far as I understand it, if it's a yes vote from the county tomorrow, it kind of puts on the raise to decide what to do. To
Mm,
either go forward and resume work because they had said in last month, we've stopped all projects. We told people not to move here anymore. We've stopped all work. So they could resume work. They could resume work. Or they could say, no, we don't have the money. There is no deal. And they can send a letter. We'll see. I don't know who's going to plug this gap. Again, we do not know how much they need, but like Mayor Ken Welch has said, not another city done. County Commission, doubt they're going to spend any more money. I mean, could it reopen negotiations? Maybe that's a possibility of like, if the raise maybe off, I don't, this is so speculative, but I'm just saying
yeah,
that like, I'm just trying to go through like all the potential
yeah,
hypotheticals, right? Of like, could they reopen and say, okay, county, we're going to give you a cut of X, like maybe a cut of naming rights or something. Again, nobody's discussed this. I don't know if there's one commissioner who's against this whole deal who like thinks that they could renegotiate. That could happen. So that's kind of yes. That's kind of the yes part. No, the no route is I don't know what you do. I mean, the Rays have said that they don't want to be unwanted owners of land. They don't want to be like villains pretty much in the town. So like I don't know if that's gonna go to court or be settled or something to get that land back, or like you could maybe build a gas plant without the Rays as a tenant if there is no ballpark, because that's the thing, right? The 300 million is going specifically to the ballpark, not the gas plant. So, but here's the thing, like Hines, the development partner for the Rays, has been very clear in saying we're interested only in working with the Rays to build the gas plant. Like we don't want to build something without a ballpark.
yeah,
So do we keep Hines in the deal if this still happens? Like unclear. And also the city that Rays, everybody has said like this kind of only works if you have an anchor tenant in the Rays. But what happens if you don't have that? Do you still have gas plant? Do you blow things up? I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like maybe this ends up in court. Again, nobody has threatened court. No,
Yeah.
I want to be very clear. Nobody has threatened court. But when we talk about like all the different pathways, like maybe court, maybe.
Yeah, well, hopefully on your end things can end soon so you can start trying to report on other things that aren't just this deal because I'm sure that I mean, like from my end I'm already fatigued and annoyed by it. I'm sure on your end there'd be a million other things that you'd want to try to cover. But hey, this is still interesting. So
It's interesting.
yeah, I'm sure to that extent it's still fun. But Colleen, thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to thanks again for coming on, I should say, since you already came on previously about this and trying to inform our listeners as much as possible. Where can people find you at to continue to follow this? Because again, tomorrow is going to be a big day, and I'm sure people are going to want to follow that either on video or through tweets, posts, whatever it might be online.
Yeah. I would encourage people to find my work at tampabay.com / author / Colleen Wright. And you can find all my work there. I'm always encouraging people to subscribe because that is how I get paid. And I'd love to continue doing this work. And I am also on Twitter or X at Colleen_Wright. And I'm always tweeting links to my stories and my coverage. So yeah, thanks for having me and please subscribe.
Yes, Colleen, thank you so much again for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
That's going to do it for this latest episode of Raise the Roof. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much to Colleen for coming on, fitting us in with her busy schedule. If you guys don't follow what we have going on here at Raise the Roof, we are on social media at Raise the Roof TV. You can find us on Twitter /X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. We also have our YouTube channel, which we're going to be trying to post more content on over the course of this offseason, including these podcast episodes. For the podcast, continue to support us as you guys have been. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to leave us a review, hopefully a 5-star review, and be sure to share this with your family, your friends, anyone who is a baseball fan or a Rays fan that wants to add a podcast into their podcast feed. One final shout out to our sponsors, SeatGeek, In the Clutch, and 1771 Designs. Be sure to use all of our discount codes there. It's code Raise the Roof in all caps for both SeatGeek and In the Clutch, and code Raise the Roof. The R, the T, and the R are capitalized for 1771 Designs. Be sure to use those. Helps us out in the process. Helps you guys get some good deals on everything clothing related, ticket related, anything that you want. Use those codes. With that being said, thanks so much for listening, and as always, raise up.